Gravity Falls, a show of humor, mystery, and casual viewing. Unless you're me. My name is Christian. You're probably wondering why I'm dressed as Tipper Pines and about to rewatch the entire series. Rest assured, there's a perfectly logical explanation. All right, now move on to the Inconveniencing. And this is definitely another big episode as far as character introductions. And the basic premise of this episode is that Dipper starts to have a crush on Wendy and is basically trying to impress her in a way because, she's obviously older than him. She's 16 and he's 12 years old. So he kind of comes up with this lie to say that he's 13, technically a teen, to get in with her and her best friends, which include Robbie Valentino. And he's basically kind of like this wannabe punk rocker guy. He has a band, he plays guitar, he tries to act all cool, but he's actually really a jerk and kind of, insecure in a way. We get introduced to the character of Nate and Lee, who are pretty much the same character in a way, who are based on Mike Miranda's actual friends who are actually named Nate and Lee. They're kind of like the jokester characters who just want to have a good time and everything. We get introduced to the character of Tambry, who's basically kind of like the goth girl in a way, and she's always like texting on her phone and everything and doesn't really want to social interact with anybody. And then we get introduced to the character of Thompson, who's kind of based on Mike Miranda, and he's kind of like this big chunky character who's always kind of like the butt of everyone's jokes. Everyone's always making fun of him and everything. So then Dipper and Mabel want to hang out with Wendy and the crew as they kind of break into this old abandoned convenience store called Dusk to Dawn and just have a good time because it's supposedly haunted by ghosts. And Dipper's always trying to prove himself. He's trying to grow up too fast. He's trying to be one of the cool kids and everything. So then eventually they kind of break into the convenience store and, they have a good time and everything. And as the evening goes on, Dipper realizes that, maybe this place actually might be haunted. He goes into one of the refrigerators to grab a bag of ice, which the symbol of bag of ice will definitely be important, and sees like kind of like a monstrous figure in there, and he kind of goes to tell the others about it, but they don't believe him. They think he's just like an annoying kid. He tries to tell Mabel, but then Mabel's kind of got into this expired smile dip and has all these different fantasies and everything, so she's kind of out of the running. And speaking of her fantasies, we get introduced to a couple of her fantasy characters named Aoshima, who's like this giant dolphin with multiple arms and can fly and shoot lasers and stuff. And Aoshima is actually named after one of the directors of Gravity Falls, John Aoshima. So I think that's a really funny Easter egg. And then we get introduced to a character called the Flavor Pup, who's like this giant yellow dog who kind of speaks backwards. And, he says a message that's kind of indecipherable. But then if you play it backwards, it actually says, "Must distrust Grunkle." And that's definitely something that'll become important later down the line. Kind of plays into that idea that's introduced actually in the theme song, where there's a message that's written in Caesar cipher. And Caesar cipher is basically a message that's written, but it's like 3 letters back. So if you use the Caesar cipher and you actually read the message, it actually says Stan is not what he seems. And that kind of ties into the ending of the first episode where, Stan goes into the vending machine and you don't really know if you're really supposed to trust him or not. So everything's kind of starting to tie in a little bit more. The dots are starting to kind of connect a little bit more. These different characters just kind of goes into the whole theme of Alex Hirsch kind of like rewarding the viewer with these little Easter eggs. People who might watch the show, at face value can be entertained, but people who are kind of like really paying attention to the details can kind of see the different messages and everything. But back to the story, eventually the convenience store becomes haunted. We realize that it was actually haunted by these two ghosts named Ma and Pa Duskerton, and that the reason why they actually died in the store and created to be haunted was because they saw these kind of 90s teenagers who are kind of really disrespectful, who are listening to their booming boxes and their disrespectfully low pants. So they kind of like died of simultaneous heart attacks and then haunted the store. And that's the reason why they hate teenagers so much and why they're haunting the teenage characters. So then all the teenagers kind of get picked off one by one in these kind of like funny scenarios and situations. And Dipper realizes that the only way to fight against the ghost is to admit that he's actually 12 years old and that he's not a teenager. So there's this conflict of like, okay, do I lie and be accepted by the teenagers, or do I tell the truth and say who I am and save the day and everything? So he obviously chooses to save the day. And the way that he chooses to save the day is with the Lammy dance, which is really, really funny, of him dressing up as a lamb and then singing the Lammy dance. And then that'll be a way to kind of lift the spirits off of the convenience store and for all the teenagers. And Lammy dance was actually based on Mike Miranda, his older sister, dressing him up as a lamb and then doing a dance. So I think that's funny that he had that kind of specific reference in this episode. So he does the Lammy dance, saves the day, the spirits are able to like move on, and the teenagers are actually able to go free. So then the teenagers kind of like ask like, how'd you defeat all these ghosts and everything? And Wendy's about to tell them the truth, but then she kind of lies and says that, Dipper was able to like fight fight the ghost and everything and free everyone. So it kind of shows that Wendy has Dipper's back, and then kind of like bonds their friendship a little bit. And then there's this little symbol that she has of like zipping her lips and throwing away the key, which is definitely something that will become important later down the line. We also got a cryptogram at the end, which translates to Onwards Aoshima, which is a reference to a line Mabel has when she's having one of her hallucinations and writing on the creature Aoshima. So overall, this is like a really fun episode, a lot of important characters introduced, kind of shows like kind of like the spookiness of the series. Overall, just a fun, entertaining episode, and definitely hints at a lot of things that'll be coming later down the line.